Aviation fans, welcome back to another episode of Imperial Diecast. And today we're going to be taking a look at an iconic plane in an iconic livery, namely a Boeing 747-400 in 1/500 scale by Herpa. So this is what the box looks like. You can see it isn't in the usual Herpa style and branding, and that's because most of these releases were exclusive to the in-flight shop of Cathay Pacific, called Sea Excitement. So they didn't come with the Herpa box, but with the Sea Excitement box, and were basically passed on from people who had initially bought the models from the onboard service, or perhaps from a Cathay Pacific duty-free shop, and therefore still have a bit of a premium price tag associated with them, despite being old models. I managed to get this for €13 back in early 2022, and coming back 2 years later, or a little more than 2 years, it's actually harder to find now. The cargo version is easier to find. The special occasion Spirit of Hong Kong livery, where the entire plane was painted in green, is also easier to find. And the retro livery is way more expensive than this one. But yeah, here it is. The Cathay Pacific Boeing 747-400. Now, I've already reviewed a couple of Boeing 747s on my channel, and it would make my videos tedious and repetitive if I repeated the history of the jumbo jet in every review, so you can watch it in some of my other 747 reviews at the end of this one. But in this video, I want to talk a little bit about how impressive it was to land the, back then, world's largest civilian airliner into Hong Kong's Kai Tak Airport that operated until 1998. It was built directly in the middle of Hong Kong in Kowloon Bay, and you basically had to fly right over the buildings while taking a turn to be able to land on it. Now, the livery of this plane was adopted in 1994, so you only saw 747s fly into Kai Tak with this livery for the final 4 years of the airport existing, and the livery lasted until 2015. As for the model itself, I think this is the original Herpa release from like 1996. Herpa made another version in the Spirit of Hong Kong livery for 1997, which was mostly dark green and had Hong Kong's skyline painted around the windows. But Herpa re-released the 744 in the normal Cathay Pacific livery again in 2005, with scale-accurate landing gear, and then again in 2008 with Rolls-Royce logos on the engines. And, I mean, there has been a confusing amount of re-releases, but the ones with the new landing gear are a lot harder to find for a good price than this older 90s model, which, in terms of livery, is the same. Because it even has the registration, which many 90s Herpa models didn't have. But let's take a closer look at this model. So we'll begin our review by taking a look at the side of the plane here at the port side, the L1 door, and you can see that it has a door handle and a porthole, and to the top left we have the Cathay Pacific logo, which I will go to in detail when we reach the tail. But then we have the Cathay Pacific branding here, the upper floor with the emergency exit door that doesn't have any kind of handle or anything like that. Now, as we're going through the window line, maybe some of you can already tell that my model does have a flaw. If you look closely, you will notice that the window line is too far down, as in too close to the wings. I don't know if it's just a misprint on my model, or whether this particular release year's entire batch was affected by this issue, but it certainly was fixed in later releases. And you can see that, especially when it comes to the top floor, it just doesn't align with the cockpit windows. So there's definitely something wrong with this print. But if you don't look too closely, I suppose you wouldn't have noticed it. Anyway, let's move on to the rest of the plane. And we have the L3 door, the L4, and the L5 door with Swire Group branding underneath the final few windows of the window line there. And the plane's registration is Bravo Hotel Uniform India. Now, taking a look at the vertical stabilizer. The Cathay Pacific logo is known as the brush wing, a calligraphic stroke in the shape of a bird's wing. And I think it looks really cool, especially in this old livery. It's also got a red trim down there. And here's a look at the horizontal stabilizers. You can see that they've got the gray paint, so it's not just bare metal. And now if we take a look at the wings of the plane. Okay, maybe this isn't the first release because the wings are actually done pretty nicely. They're not just bare metal, and you can see that they have a gray paint. And if we look closer, we can see that we have the flaps, the ailerons, the air brakes, and things like that modeled onto it without being painted over, so they're nicely visible. The outer winglets have the Cathay Pacific striping painted onto them as well. And now taking a look at the engines. They've got silver engine cowlings and some nice detail for the interior despite the small size. And these slimmer engines are definitely Rolls-Royce RB211s and not Pratt & Whitney PW4000s or General Electric CF6s, which were also options for the 744. But Herpa made them a tad too small, I think. This was, I believe, corrected in later releases. Again, another reason why they are harder to find. As for the front of the plane, you can see that the cockpit windows are there, but they don't have any window wipers or any silver edges. And what's also missing is the emergency exit above the cockpit. So, yeah. But I think the plane still looks nice from the front. And here's a look at the other side of the plane. And you can see that the printing here doesn't look as bad as on the other side. I think that it's a little higher up. In either case, you can also see that this does have the old clunky landing gear. So that's probably another issue why I could find this for cheap. But I think on a 747 it doesn't matter as much. And if we take a look at the rear of the engines, they don't have any exhaust detailing. I can just focus this a little better. Yeah. And also, the tails of these OG Herpas didn't have the proper, seamless design to them. Anyway, if we take a look at the bottom of the plane, you can see that we have Herpa written here. And there's also a little slot for the base that used to be delivered alongside this plane. It's a small black plastic base that I'll show you in a second. But we can also see the trailing edge fairings here that are done very nicely. And yeah, even the underside of the wings are painted in two-tone, so that's cool. Now, Herpa also released this plane in 1/400 scale. And you can see they added some extra detail for that scale, such as cockpit window frames, no step markings on the wings, beacon lights, Rolls-Royce branding on the engines, and a silver leading edge for the vertical stabilizer. But even the 1/500 re-releases with the new landing gear go for like $40, so I didn't even bother checking what the 1/400 versions go for. And here we have the 1/500 scale Cathay Pacific Boeing 747-400, mounted on its Herpa stand. Now the stand is made out of plastic, but it still looks good, and you can place this on your desk and it's gonna give the plane a much better look than if it's just on the ground. So I like the fact that Cathay Pacific, or Sea Excitement, provided us with these bases for their exclusive models, I guess, from 20 years ago. It still looks cool. Now here's a comparison of the two Cathay Pacific planes that I have in my collection, the 747-400 and the 777-300. And I think that they look great next to each other, and each captures the essence of the old livery in a different way, I think. Let me know in the comments which one you think looks better. One thing's for certain, though, the 777-300 could carry almost as much passengers as the 747-400, and I think it was even longer, although it just had one deck instead of two. So I hope you guys liked my review of Herpa's 1/500 scale Cathay Pacific Boeing 747-400, and despite some of the minor issues it has, I still think it looks good for a quarter-century-old model. And the fact that it came with an airline-branded box and a plastic stand is the cherry on top. I have reviewed other planes you can check out here, so take care. This is Imperial Diecast, signing out.